In Western societies, children are often expected to move out and away from home once they leave for college. Articles about moving out and away from home talk about the benefits of moving out, such as strengthening emotional intelligence, learning to rely on yourself more, developing life skills, and helping you prepare for the next stage of life. Even living at home while financially contributing to the family income is seen as the next step before children move out and live on their own. These standards have created a sense of shame and stigma around living at home and also paints a nasty and inaccurate caricature of what type of person ends up moving back in with their parents. News articles and opinion pieces shame adults for living at home and encourages them to prepare to move out of the house. Even advice columns that talk about how to accept living at home remind adults they should eventually move out. Why is it that living by ourselves and moving away from home is so praised and those who live at home are shunned and made fun of?
In this scene, a grown brother and sister is living in their parents' house. The sister is married and even has a family of her own. These types of cohabitation are quite common in East Asia. Depictions of adults living with their parents are quite common in East Asian media, reflecting the social acceptance of adults living with parents until marriage and even after marriage.
Failure to launch inspired by a USA op-ed about the growing number of parents still supporting their adult children, still living at home. ABC's Jutu Cheng has a closer look at the trend and how you can help your children get on their own 2 feet.
Marissa Pyatt sleeps in the same bed she did when she was 10. Except now she's 24, an adult still living at home. And she's not alone. Living with parents is now the most common arrangement for millennials ages 18 to 34. Her parents, Vicky and Bob, who work 3 jobs between them, are allowing Marissa to stay rent-free while she pays off her student loan debt.
I don't really make her give me money for every little thing like I should do.
Personal financial expert Peter Dunn says having a plan to fly the coop is key.
The bottom line is your financial problems should not become anyone else's.
But speaking of that, so you're living with them now? Are you going to move out at some point? Because you should.
Immediately.
Yeah.
Yes. No, as soon as I can. I love my parents, but we have a roommate relationship right now, which is interesting. You get home cooked meals, but then you also have random trips to the kitchen in the middle of the night and just the random run-ins that just might be a little uncomfortable from time to time.
Naked?
Sometimes shirtless, maybe a little naked.
A little naked?
Maybe a little naked.
Your mom or you? Who's naked?
Me.
Okay, all right.
Oh man, that was a mental picture. Oh man.
Yeah.
Man. She was dangerous. Oh.
I don't know. You're said naked, and you have to elaborate.
I have to specify. You're
okay,
right, yes.
yeah.
Hi, I'm Andy. Ellen asked me to remind you to subscribe to her.
Now, we have to keep the same energy with Michael B. Jordan that we keep with everybody else. He is a scrub. That is scrub behavior. I don't care that he's in movies. I don't care that he's rich. If you got the means to move out of your mama house and you don't, you are extra scrub.
But he also hasn't been home in the past couple of years. So now that he's home, I guess he's actually said he's trying to find something now. So.
Nope.
I ain't mad at that, though. If I wasn't married and I ain't have kids, your mama cook for you 3 times a day?
No, you are extra scrub. Like, listen,
it's
one thing.
Rent?
It's one thing when when you're somebody who can't get out of their mama house, like you don't have the means. But when you got the means and you still living with your parents, you are extra scrub.
He ain't a scrub, man.
Yes,
scrub
he
if he ain't got the means. He got the means. He probably paying for the rent. But mama,
maybe he's just frugal.
Mama cook you 3 times a day.
You think they're still renting?
Listen, man, he's hanging out of the side of Ryan Coogler's ride. Okay, that's what he's doing.
8 years of free room and board is long enough. That is the feeling of an upstate New York couple who's been trying to kick their 30-year-old son, Michael Rotondo, out of their house. As incentive, they gave him money to get started. They even sent him several letters to vacate, but the son says he was not given enough notice. Michael has a young son himself who he lost custody of within the last year. And now these parents have actually gone to the courts. And the verdict is that the judge evicted him. And I had a chance to speak with Michael moments ago. Here's our conversation. Michael, welcome.
Hi.
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 Hi. So let me start with you're 30.
Right.
The simplest question: do you not want to find your own place?
Since America functions as an individualistic society in that we prioritize the good of the individual over the good of the group, Americans typically hold independent self-concepts, rather than the interdependent self-concepts prevalent in collectivistic societies. Hine discusses how people in individualistic cultures emphasize their independence and the importance of self-sufficiency, while people in collectivistic cultures emphasize their relationships with their in-groups. Marcus and Kitayama describe the differences of these self-concepts in regard to in-group, out-group relationships. Those with an independent self-concept view themselves as separate from their in-group relationships, with defining characteristics deriving from within the individual. As such, the self is stable and fixed, while the boundaries to the in-group are permeable, allowing the individual's self to remain relatively unaffected by the coming and going of others within their in-group. Those with interdependent self-concepts, on the other hand, view themselves as closely connected to the members of their group with defining characteristics depending on their relationships with others. Individuals with this concept view the self as a situation-dependent and fluid with an impermeable in-group boundary. These differences influence the norms and behavior that exist within these societies. The question then becomes, how deep did these differences go? Research by Zhu, Shang, Fan, and Han compared fMRI brain scans of independent and interdependent individuals when asked to describe themselves and their mothers. For the interdependent group, the same brain area, the prefrontal cortex, which is linked to self-representation, activated when describing both their mothers and themselves, while the independent group showed separate areas of brain activation. This shows how intertwined interdependent individuals' self-concept is within their in-group, viewing those close to them as an extension of themselves. Independent Westerners, on the other hand, have a self-concept entirely distinct from their in-group. With this in mind, it is evident that individualistic Americans value their independence to a much higher degree than individuals from collectivistic societies, likely influencing their prioritization of leaving the parental home to reach what they consider to be a significant and necessary stepping stone towards independence, rather than a transition to marriage. Research by Kleinapire and DeWalk further supports this conclusion, with the finding that marriage directly out of the parental home is rare within the native Dutch population, an individualistic culture. But for Turkish and Moroccan immigrants in the Netherlands, marriage was the primary reason to leave home.
The American advice to move out from your parents' home as soon as possible conforms with the psychological theory of independent self that is common in the U.S. because it is promoting self-reliance and independence, both of which are key aspects of an independent self. In East Asian cultures, the interdependent self-concept is more prevalent, and that can be seen in their general acceptance of having young adults live with their parents until they get married. A study done on bicultural European, South Asian, and East Asian young adults looked at the influence of culture and family on their decision to move out of the family home. One aspect that the researchers found to mediate the relationship between culture and their decision to move out was family allocentrism. Family allocentrism is the idea that one's self-concept is defined mostly by their family. This was a significant explanation, particularly for those with South Asian backgrounds, and directly relates to the psychological theory of interdependent self-concept previously discussed. As would be expected with the prevalence of the theory of independent self-concept in the West, the influence of family allocentrism was not significant in the European sample. The norm of leaving the family home after finishing school is much more common in individualistic Western cultures than collectivistic cultures such as in South and East Asia, and is even decreasing in popularity among Westerners in our current climate. Recent statistics show that a peak number of young American adults are living at home since the Great Depression. In Europe and Canada as well, rates have gone up drastically in the past decade, with approximately 48% of 18 to 34-year-olds in Europe and 42% of 20 to 29-year-olds in Canada living with their parents. All of these generally individualistic Western societies are becoming more open to the concept of living with one's parents in their 20s. Does that mean that this piece of advice doesn't hold up in today's society? Not likely, because despite the apparent increase of living in one's family home, there is still judgment in our individualistic society when someone says that they're living with their parents after the age of 18. As shown earlier, it is very common for Westerners to associate laziness and lack of success with those who continue to live with their parents into their 20s, even with its increasing popularity.
While there's no right or wrong answer on what children should do once they reach adulthood, the cultural expectations placed on children should be recognized when thinking about whether or not the North American advice of moving out from your parents' home as soon as possible is good advice.